We're going to go into the security area of San Quentin. In the unlikely event that you're taken hostage while you're inside the prison, the state of California will not negotiate your release for an inmate's release.
Welcome to San Quentin Rehabilitation Center, better known as San Quentin State Prison. A place where even the walls have stories they'd rather forget. This isn't just any prison, it's the end of the line. A fortress of despair that has housed some of the most notorious criminals in history, including infamous names like Charles Manson,
I'm a tramp, a bum, a hobo,
and Richard Ramirez.
I think most humans have in them the capacity to commit murder.
At one point back in 2015, San Quentin held almost 700 inmates on death row, making it the largest condemned unit in the Western Hemisphere. It was where the state's most dangerous offenders used to await their fate in cells barely larger than a parking space. From the twisted minds of serial killers to the cold calculations of gang leaders, the eerie hallways of San Quentin have seen it all. If these cells could talk, they'd probably scream. Here, survival isn't about ticking off days. It's about making sure those days don't crush you. What survival tactics can mean the difference between life and death within San Quentin's treacherous social hierarchy? How did one inmate's fate become eerily entwined with the very gas chamber he helped construct? And how did the pandemic expose the prison's darkest vulnerabilities, turning it into a ticking time bomb? To uncover these chilling stories and more, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you have any prison survival stories, let us know in the comments. San Quentin opened its iron doors in 1854, making it California's oldest prison. Originally built to relieve overcrowding on prison ships, yeah, you heard that right, floating jails. The facility quickly became a home for the state's most dangerous offenders. In the early days, barbaric practices like flogging and painful shower baths with pressurized water hoses were common. Hangings were public spectacles, drawing crowds eager for a morbid show. Between 1893 and 1942, California's preferred way to deal with death row was the hangman's noose, snapping 215 necks in total. With a history stained in blood, it's no surprise the inmates had a fond nickname for it: the arena. In 1938, the gas chamber was introduced and tested first on a pig, which disturbingly took 34 excruciating minutes to die. So much for quick and painless. And the guards were just as notorious as the inmates. Take Amos Lunt, for instance, who conducted 24 hangings over 5 years. He warned his successor, Frank Arbogast, about haunting voices and hallucinations. Lunt later ended up in an asylum, proving that in San Quentin, even the executioners weren't safe from the madness. Then there's Alfred Wells, an inmate who helped build San Quentin's gas chamber. After returning to society while on parole for armed robbery, he began dating his half-sister, which sparked a violent family feud. Wells murdered his half-brother's wife, and their younger friend. And sure enough, he found himself back at San Quentin, but this time on death row. In 1942, he was killed in the very gas chamber he helped build. Yeah, talk about building your own destiny. But San Quentin isn't all doom and gloom, believe it or not. In 1969, Johnny Cash performed live at the prison, a concert that was recorded and became one of his most iconic albums, Johnny Cash at San Quentin. He even debuted the hit song A Boy Named Sue during his performance. Perhaps the ultimate survival tip is this: even in the darkest corners, never miss a chance to find your soul and rhythm. But enough about history. Let's imagine, hypothetically, you've been misunderstood by the justice system. Or perhaps there was a case of mistaken identity and now you're on a one-way trip to San Quentin. How do you survive a place designed to break you? Picture this. Your first day begins with a security clearance that's more intimate than your first colonoscopy. Fingerprints, mugshots, and a fashion downgrade to basic blue denim.
They pick you up butt crack of dawn, man. That's before you get on the bus, of course. You gotta get shackled, belly chains, everything.
As you walk the echoing halls to your new studio apartment, a 4 by 10 foot cell, the reality sinks in. Your fellow inmates warm up to you with grueling once-overs and casual threats. Welcome to your new home. Friendly advice: avoid discussing politics, religion, or who controls the TV remote. At dawn, you're greeted by the sweet serenade of clanging metal and distant shouting. Roll call is mandatory and bright and early. If you're not a morning person, well, you will be now. The food has improved over the years, but don't expect restaurant quality here. Mealtimes are strictly regimented and reflect the unwritten rules that govern life here. Inmates tend to eat with their own racial groups, and seating arrangements are enforced by inmate codes. As Louis Theroux observed during his visit, violating these unspoken rules can have serious consequences.
Ooh, I can't tell you the code, you gotta know the code. I'm saying the whole cell might beat you.
Why?
That's the code, I don't know, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You gonna have to figure out why.
Navigating the yard is like walking a tightrope over a pit of hungry lions. Exercise is essential, not just for your health, but to show you're not an easy target. Just remember, the weight benches aren't the only things that can crush you. Gangs are a reality here, each with its own territory, codes, and extreme ideologies. San Quentin is controlled by formidable factions like the Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family, Mexican Mafia, and the Nuestra Familia. These aren't just street gangs, they're shadow governments. Their ironclad codes dictate every aspect of life, like who you can talk to, where you sit, and even which shower you can use. Violating their unwritten laws is met with swift and brutal retribution that makes solitary confinement look like a vacation. In here, picking a side isn't about loyalty, it's about survival. Neutrality is a safe bet, but sometimes choosing no side is the quickest way to stand alone.
Different races have different areas?
Yeah, that's like the black area over there, the Norteño area over there, white area over here, Indians over there. We keep it segregated.
If you've managed to find a group to fit in with and haven't started a turf war, then it's time to find some activities. Afternoons are for work assignments or educational programs. You might make license plates, join the basketball team, or take classes. Keeping busy isn't just a way to pass the time. It's a strategy to avoid becoming part of someone else's agenda. For some people, these programs are a way out. But more on that later. Dinner time at San Quentin is a highly orchestrated event. With nearly 5,000 dinner meals served each day, the culinary team works tirelessly to prepare the food. But this is where the real challenge begins. As you navigate the crowded room, you're keenly aware that where you sit isn't just about comfort. The hall is a patchwork of territories, each claimed by different gangs and racial groups. One wrong move, like sitting at the wrong table or in someone else's spot, can ignite tensions, turning a simple meal into a matter of survival. In San Quentin, even dinner comes with a side of danger. As the sun sets, you return to your cell. You should count your blessings if you've made it back in one piece. Lockdown commences and the prison's spine-chilling quietness settles in. Every inmate is confined to their cell, and all movement within the prison grinds to a halt. The silence during lockdown serves as a tool for control within the prison system, reinforcing authority and minimizing opportunities for coordinated disturbances. Consequences for breaking the lockdown could mean solitary confinement or even an extended lockdown for the entire cell block. Trust me, you do not want to be that guy. This is when tensions can rise. Your mind can start to get paranoid about every creak and shadow. A good book or a hobby can keep your mind occupied, and less focused on the unsettling sounds echoing through the halls. This was especially important if you were an inmate on death row. Here, life took on a whole new level of isolation. Confined to a tiny cell, every movement was monitored. You'd be stripped and handcuffed for even the smallest infractions. One inmate remarked,
"I don't think lions and tigers should be locked up like this."
With executions put on pause in California since 2006, inmates faced indefinite limbo for years, adding to the mental strain. Some prisoners took extreme measures to get their cases looked at.
I killed my cellie. That's the only way I was going to be able to get back into court, to do something like that.
But where you end up in death row was just as important. There was the quiet section, called North Segregation, or North Seg, built in 1934 for prisoners who didn't cause trouble. Then there was the East Block, a sprawl of 520 one-man cells stacked on top of one another in 5 tiers. And last but not least was the area known as the Adjustment Center, strictly reserved for the worst of the worst. It had the highest security in the entire prison. Inmates here were too violent to be held anywhere else. The cells had solid cement doors. This was implemented in 1978 to prevent inmates from throwing feces at the guards. Yikes, that's a tough gig. But luckily for you, death row is a thing of the past. More on that soon. For now, you'll need to lay low if you want to live longer than your sentence. First rule of surviving San Quentin today: respect is a two-way street paved with caution signs. Building alliances can offer protection, but choose wisely. Friendships here are as stable as a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Avoid conflicts by minding your own business. If trouble finds you, defuse it with words, not fists. Remember, a black eye heals faster than a stab wound. Guards hold the keys, literally and figuratively. Show respect, follow the rules, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get that extra phone call or a heads up about potential trouble. But be cautious. Pushing boundaries can land you in hot water. Inmates continually test the limits. Smuggling contraband like homemade cell phones can seem tempting, but comes with severe consequences. Getting caught with contraband isn't just a slap on the wrist, it's more like a kick to the teeth, followed by a one-way trip to the hole where daylight is a forgotten friend. We're talking extended sentences, solitary confinement so deep as if you've been buried alive, and privileges stripped away faster than you can say contraband. But wait, there's more. You'll become a person of interest to both the guards and your fellow inmates. Disrupting the delicate ecosystem of this concrete jungle doesn't win you any friends. It's like painting a target on your back. With that in mind, you'll need to stay in shape. Mental and physical health are your lifelines. Dive into the prison library or enroll in educational programs.
The community college, believed to be the first in the nation with a campus inside a prison, is the latest addition to rehabilitation programs provided to California inmates.
It's about more than just passing time. At San Quentin, the Prison University Project has enabled over 4,500 inmates to earn college credits, and some have even obtained degrees behind bars. Education here isn't just a privilege, it's a lifeline that can redefine your future. Remember what we mentioned about working out? In places like San Quentin, fitness isn't just a hobby, it's survival. Some inmates commit to extreme routines like hundreds of burpees every day. This level of physical conditioning isn't just for show. It's a deterrent against potential threats. Being in peak shape sends a clear message. You're not an easy target. Others find solace in yoga and meditation, maintaining inner peace amidst chaos. An occupied mind is less likely to spiral into the abyss. But despite your best efforts, violence can be as unpredictable as it is brutal. In 2010, child murderer Edward Schaefer was fatally attacked with a homemade weapon, a bone crusher fashioned from bed parts. But that wasn't the first time San Quentin's walls have seen this much bloodshed. Back in August 1971, the prison descended into chaos during one of its deadliest riots. An attempted escape by George Jackson, a prominent inmate and activist, ignited a violent uprising. Inmates armed themselves with smuggled guns and improvised weapons, turning the cell blocks into a battleground. By the time the dust settled, 3 correctional officers and 3 inmates were dead. This is a stark reminder that in San Quentin, violence can erupt like a sudden storm. Inmates have long memories and their own code of justice. So you've finally gotten accustomed to the hellish nature of this prison. Prison life is starting to seem manageable. But it's 2020 and you're blissfully ignorant that the world has been brought to a stop by the COVID-19 pandemic. During this time, San Quentin became a hotspot for the coronavirus. Over 1,000 inmates tested positive, turning the prison into a humanitarian crisis. One inmate described it as like a horror movie where you have nowhere to run. Overcrowding and poor sanitation turned the prison into a petri dish. The virus didn't spare death row either, adding another layer of anxiety to an already uncertain existence. The impact extended beyond inmates too. Staff members and their families were affected, with lawsuits alleging negligence in handling the pandemic. But change is on the horizon. As of 2019, California's governor, Gavin Newsom, has put a moratorium on the death penalty, calling it state-sponsored premeditated murder.
To me, this is the right thing to do.
For the first time in California's history, eligible individuals on death row can now be placed in general population areas, where they have increased access to job opportunities and rehabilitation programs similar to inmates serving life sentences without parole.
I look forward to the aspect of being able to move around, talk, do things on my own, maybe get a job.
These programs are gaining traction, aiming to transform San Quentin from a warehouse of despair to a center of reform. For instance, the prison's Guiding Rage into Power program addresses anger management and emotional healing, helping over 1,000 inmates reduce violent behavior and reconnect with their humanity. These initiatives aren't just buzzwords. They're changing lives one inmate at a time. Through programs like The Last Mile, inmates are learning to code and even developing apps, all within prison walls. One participant, Kenyatta Lael, went from serving a life sentence to becoming a manager at a tech company after his release. These aren't just classes. They're offering a real chance at a second act. It's a glimmer of hope in a place that's been shrouded in darkness for over a century. Surviving San Quentin isn't just about dodging danger. It's about finding purpose in a place designed to strip you of it. While escape is virtually impossible, sorry, this isn't a Hollywood movie, enduring and emerging stronger is the ultimate victory. So, if you want to avoid neighbors that prefer shanks over handshakes, it's best to stay on the right side of the law, especially if you're a drug lord like El Chapo. We'll explore why he needed over-the-top prison security in another episode of How to Survive.
El Salvador was once one of the most violent countries in Latin America.
Just over 1,500 miles south of the U.S. border, there's nearly 1 homicide an hour.
The country was once the murder capital of the world. For decades, rival gangs ruled the streets of El Salvador.
You used to find head on the floor. People decapitate on the street.
So many friends, I lost it. They killed them next to me.
President Nayib Bukele is celebrating the massive prison's opening, a cornerstone of his war on gangs.
In less than a year, it cut its murder rate in half.
Por lo tanto, creo que entre a este set no va a volver a salir. Y eso es garantizado para la población salvadoreña tal cual como.
Welcome to CECOT, a prison so massive it makes San Quentin look like a quaint bed and breakfast. Covering over 410 acres of land and with the capacity to hold 40,000 inmates, it's one of the largest penitentiaries in the world. A concrete jungle designed to contain the uncontainable. Since its opening in early 2023, over 14,000 inmates have already been processed here, accumulating over 90 million human hours behind bars. Prisoners here aren't allowed phone calls, books, or any time outdoors. They sleep on metallic bunks, crammed together in groups of 80, and are carefully surveilled day and night by armed guards. It's a living hell with the lights on 24/7. Room with a view? More like a cell with no escape. Survival here isn't just about dodging danger. It's about enduring a system engineered to break you mentally and physically.
Hundreds of inmates, barefoot and stripped down to white shorts, scurry into El Salvador's new mega prison, ordered to crouch down on the ground one after another.
Nicknamed the Alcatraz of Central America, this vast fortress holds the worst of the worst, including dangerous gang members from MS-13 and Barrio 18, known for their notoriously high kill counts.
We murdered a lot of people. We gotta do what we gotta do to survive, and that's the life of a gangbanger.
But it also holds many who relatives believe have been wrongfully accused. There is no database, public access, or legal grounds to confirm who is actually being held there.
Relatives of those detained have been desperately trying to find out what's happened to them.
So, how did this colossal institution come to be? What horrific event inspired the construction of CECOT? Why is the prison under fire for human rights violations? And what makes this prison so high-tech and inescapable? We'll test your limits and see if you have what it takes to survive Latin America's biggest prison. CECOT, officially known as Centro de Confinamiento del Terrorismo, that's a mouthful, or the Terrorism Confinement Center, didn't appear overnight. It rose from the ashes of a nation terrorized by rampant gang violence. In El Salvador, gang warfare isn't just a crime problem. It's a crisis that has driven tens of thousands to flee their homeland in search of safety. On March 26, 2022, the country reached a tipping point. In a span of 24 hours, more than 80 people were murdered, marking one of the deadliest days in El Salvador's recent history. This wasn't an isolated incident either. It was the culmination of escalating violence that had been gripping the nation. With some of the highest murder rates in the world and overcrowded prisons like Zacatecoluca, El Salvador was once known as one of the most dangerous countries. In March 2022, President Nayib Bukele, a leader with an approval rating soaring above 80%, decided enough was enough. He declared a state of emergency, leading to the arrest of at least 81,000 people in one fell swoop. Critics called it authoritarian. Supporters saw it as necessary.
We literally doubled the army to fight crime. We equipped them, vehicles, drones, basic things that an operation of that magnitude would need. And then we went after them.
On top of this, he denied basic constitutional rights like the freedom of assembly and the right to legal defense. This has allowed the Salvadoran government to hold and detain suspected criminals for up to 15 days, instead of the usual 72 hours. And if they are charged, they could spend months in detention before facing trial. Since the implementation of these stricter policies, it is estimated more than 3,000 children with suspected gang affiliations have been arrested and detained without a warrant.
Disculpe, ¿a dónde llevan al muchacho? ¿Y qué hizo? ¿Pero qué hiciste, chico? ¿Ah?
Bukele is a controversial figure both at home and abroad.
De la Asamblea Legislativa no quieren ni siquiera aprobar dinero que no es de ellos.
In February 2020, he deployed armed soldiers into El Salvador's Legislative Assembly to pressure lawmakers into approving a $109 million loan for his security plan.
Armed police and soldiers with rifles and wearing body armor entered the chamber and stood guard, a move not seen since the end of the country's civil war in 1992.
Well, that's one way to say please and thank you with a few extra firearms. Other reports allege that Bukele's administration had secret negotiations with gangs to reduce homicide rates in exchange for prison privileges and other rewards. While the government denies these claims, international watchdogs remain skeptical. With constitutional rights treated like optional guidelines, the blueprint for CECOT was drawn, a mega prison designed to house the country's most dangerous individuals. Constructed at an estimated $100 million, though the true costs remain cloaked in secrecy by Salvadoran authorities, and forged from over 800,000 cubic feet of concrete with 1,322 US tons of steel, CECOT isn't just the largest prison by capacity. It's a fortress meant to send a clear message to the gangs that have terrorized El Salvador. Your reign ends here. Welcome to your first day at CECOT and the last day of your human rights. As you arrive, the intake process is exhaustive. You're stripped of personal belongings and subjected to the usual fingerprinting, along with retinal and facial recognition scans. If they could scan your thoughts, they probably would. New inmates are often forced to march into the facility shackled and barefoot, with heads shaved, as a form of immediate dehumanization. As you walk through the facility, you're always under watch. Guards stand in front of the cells at all times, and even above you. The corridors are lined with security personnel. You're herded into a group cell designed for 80 inmates, but often holding up to 100 due to overcrowding. The only furniture is tiered metal bunks without sheets, pillows, or mattresses. Talk about back pain. There's an open toilet in the corner and a cement basin with a plastic bucket for washing. Your drinking water is shared from one large jug. Dehydration is a constant threat, especially considering El Salvador's tropical climate. Is it just me, or does this kind of look like Squid Games minus the cash prize? Locked inside for 23.5 hours a day. You have no educational programs, no books, and no letters from home. The isolation is total. The 30 minutes outside your cell are spent in tightly controlled activities. Sometimes it's group exercises under the watchful eyes of armed guards. Other times it's mandatory Bible readings, regardless of your faith or beliefs. But even these moments are riddled with tension. Inmates are required to maintain silence during activities, and any deviation can result in immediate punishment.
When one of the inmate prisoners does a mistake and misbehaves, or they have a fight between them, they have to enter one of these doors and rooms, and they have to stay there 15 days in pure dark, pure isolation.
Meals slide through a cold steel slot. Every single day, it's the same grim routine. A scoop of rice, a dollop of beans, and a flimsy tortilla. Not once is there a hint of meat. Not even a whisper of it. I guess that's one way to become a vegetarian. The food is prepared by prison staff under strict security measures to prevent tampering or smuggling of contraband. Eating is done in your cell, surrounded by dozens of other inmates, making mealtimes chaotic and stressful. There are no special privileges. Everyone is treated equally harshly, regardless of gang rank or affiliation. The lights remain on 24/7, disrupting your circadian rhythm, your body's natural day and night cycle, leading to sleep deprivation. Studies have shown that constant exposure to artificial light can cause anxiety, depression, and even hallucinations over time. Great, insomnia and hallucinations, just what everyone needs in a room full of gangsters. Family visits are non-existent. The policy is absolute. No contact with the outside world. Some families have tried to send letters or appeal for visitation rights, but their requests are denied without exception. Attempts to smuggle messages or items into CECOT are met with severe punishment for both the inmate and the outside party. Despite the prison's intense security measures, desperation can drive individuals to take enormous risks. The prison security is so tight that all visitors, including journalists, must undergo multiple security checks. One reporter noted that entering the facility felt like airport security on steroids. All electronic devices are confiscated, and cell signals vanish upon approaching the main gate. The prison uses a system that blocks all phone signals to prevent any unauthorized communications. But despite such tight security, violence within the walls could still happen, especially when you're cooped up with pretty much the entirety of El Salvador's deadliest gang members. Speaking of members, we'd love your help to reach 2 million subscribers. And hit that like button if you're enjoying the show. So, how do you survive in a place designed to erase your identity? First rule, know the power dynamics. The prison is dominated by two major gangs, MS-13 and Barrio 18. These rivals have a long history of violence against each other, both inside and outside prison walls. MS-13, also known as Mara Salvatrucha, originated in Los Angeles in the 1980s and is known for its brutal tactics and international reach. Barrio 18, or 18th Street Gang, is equally feared and has its own complex hierarchy and codes. In CECOT, gang affiliation can mean the difference between protection and peril. Inmates are often segregated by gang to prevent violent clashes, but tensions run high. Knowing their codes, tattoos, and symbols is crucial. Certain hand signs, slang, and ways of dressing can indicate gang affiliation. Misreading these signs can lead to fatal misunderstandings. Wow, I'm gonna need a gang signs to English dictionary stat. The gangs also have their own cliques, or cliques, with specific names and tattoos that identify their rank and role within the larger organization. New inmates must quickly learn the unspoken rules. Respect the hierarchy, don't interfere with gang business, and never snitch. Violations can result in beatings, isolation, or worse. While official numbers are tightly controlled, human rights organizations estimate that several deaths have occurred within CECOT since its opening, often under suspicious circumstances. The volatile mix of overcrowding and rival gangs means a simple misstep can be deadly. In CECOT, respecting the prison guards isn't just a necessity, it's essential for survival. A chilling 2023 report documented that at least 261 inmates died in custody during President Nayib Bukele's unyielding anti-gang crackdown. Some of these deaths were attributed to torture and the deliberate denial of medicine and food. In one grim example, inmates who misbehaved were reportedly forced to stand for hours, sometimes days, without sleep, a form of punishment that could lead to serious physical and mental health issues. As for the prison itself, escape is virtually impossible. The facility is secured by over 600 guards and police officers, with support from military units. The perimeter is fortified with electric fences stretching over 7.5 miles, and monitored by 19 watchtowers equipped with motion sensors and thermal imaging cameras. Advanced surveillance systems track every movement within the prison. Facial recognition cameras are installed throughout. Every vehicle entering the grounds undergoes a rigorous inspection. Identities are verified multiple times through biometric scanners. Supplies are delivered under armed escort, and the staff are subject to random searches. Even the guards live on site for 5 days at a time, sleeping in quarters within the prison to ensure a constant security presence. They undergo intensive training and are equipped with non-lethal weapons that fire rubber bullets. This place makes escaping from Alcatraz look like child's play. But all this raises a question. At what point does strict become inhumane? Human rights organizations have condemned CECOT for its harsh conditions. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have called for investigations into allegations of torture, overcrowding, and denial of due process.
Importa lo que digan los organismos internacionales, que vengan a proteger a nuestra gente.
Since the 2022 state of emergency order, over 70,000 people have been arrested, including individuals with no gang affiliations. Critics argue that mass arrests without proper legal procedures violate fundamental human rights. While the US is struggling with issues in its own prison system like overcrowding, they pale in comparison to CECOT's severe practices. Lawyer and human rights defender Juan Carlos Sanchez from the Due Process of Law Foundation warns that inmates may emerge from their time at CECOT physically and mentally broken, fueling a cycle of violence rather than ending it. Another Juan Carlos, this one a former inmate, found himself trapped behind those unyielding walls for 5 months without cause.
He says the poor conditions led to an infection in his leg. He said he was lumped in and assumed to be part of a gang, and he said in part because of how he looked. He had long hair, he said he had a long beard, and he says he has tattoos, but he points out that for him these are just artistic expressions. They have nothing to do with being part of a gang.
Yet, many Salvadorans feel safer. According to government-kept records, homicide rates have dropped dramatically, from 6,656 murders in 2015 to only 154 in 2023.
Once known as the most dangerous country in the world, El Salvador now ranks among the safest countries in the Western Hemisphere.
The streets that were once controlled by gangs are now patrolled by police and military. Businesses are reopening, and citizens who once fled the country are returning. In addition to this, migration from El Salvador to the US has decreased by 50% since 2020, as people feel safer staying in their homeland.
I was robbed from the opportunity of living in my country. Now you can walk the streets safely. It's been amazing. I mean, there's been so much change.
Families that once lived in fear are now reclaiming their neighborhoods, and some expats are returning to invest in the local economy. But at what cost? The ethical dilemma is as massive as the prison itself. CECOT stands as a paradox, a fortress built to incarcerate the worst of the worst. Yet it raises profound questions about justice, human rights, and the true cost of security. Is this the future of incarceration? A place where rehabilitation is abandoned in favor of indefinite detention? It's like the most twisted episode of Black Mirror, but this is reality.
We're safer than any other country in the Western Hemisphere, which is, it was, if I would have said that 5 years ago, they would say that I was crazy.
As we grapple with the ethics of such a place, one thing is clear. CECOT is more than just a prison. It's a reflection of the extremes to which a society will go to reclaim safety and order. CECOT forces us to confront uncomfortable questions, including, does the end justify the means? Can peace built on such controversial practices be sustainable in the long term? While the prison has been effective at curbing crime rates and creating peace for citizens, it also sets a precedent that challenges democratic principles and the rule of law. The prison stands as a stark reminder that the pursuit of security must be balanced with human rights and dignity. So what do you think about CECOT? Is it a necessary evil? Let us know in the comments below. CECOT's just one of several nightmarish prisons in the world known for human rights violations. Before you make any bad decisions and end up in the clink, be sure to watch Surviving the Most Dangerous Prison Scenarios to find out if you've got what it really takes to do time. And remember, if you want to stay alive, keep watching How to Survive.
Начали кричать, избивать меня по ребрам.
Imagine the sounds of howling winds and distant metallic clanks. Being exiled to a place so desolate, you'd swear the Night King was lurking right outside your cell door. Think solitary confinement isn't extreme enough? In these Russian prisons, you can forget about cozy bunk beds and steamy oatmeal breakfasts. Survival alone is a privilege. Polar owl, black dolphin, polar wolf, Fire Island. These are not names of twisted horror films, but rather the inescapable fortresses hidden in the Russian tundra's perpetual gloom. And if you think you're tough because you endured one winter without a decent heater, well, you haven't faced minus 60-degree Fahrenheit blasts that can freeze your eyelashes off in seconds. I'm talking about remote facilities where ex-inmates, like political dissident to Vladimir Putin's regime, Alexei Navalny, have spilled gut-wrenching stories of forced standing in place in the bitter cold, brutal intimidation tactics, and claustrophobic isolation cells. And yes, in these places, your daily to-do list might include try not to get frostbite and avoid getting hosed with ice water. Even the guards seem haunted by the shadows that linger behind razor wire fences. Whew. Today, we're plunging into Russia's deadliest prisons, where even a minor slip can lead to an unmarked grave. Buckle up and keep your wits about you. Want to know how to not freeze, starve, or lose your mind if you wind up in any of these hellholes? Stick around as we find out exactly which prison forces its inmates to stand for 16 hours straight, which Arctic nightmare douses prisoners with ice-cold water, and who survived almost 300 days in solitary confinement. Black Dolphin Prison, officially known as Penal Colony Number 6, sits in Soledetsk, right on the Russian-Kazakhstan border. It houses around 700 of the most dangerous criminals in the country, including murderers, terrorists, serial killers, and cannibals, all serving life without parole. When you're transferred here, say goodbye to any sense of freedom or dignity. Welcome to your new home. And sorry, there are no dolphins here. Can't memorize any hallway or corridor layout. Then, they're bent over at the waist, hands cuffed behind them, and yanked upward in a position bound for back problems. This is done to keep prisoners disoriented and totally under control. And that's not the worst part. At Black Dolphin, you'll need to stand the test of time. Literally. Inmates must stand during waking hours, around 16 to be precise, and can't minutes, presumably to make sure nobody's dozing off or practicing their best Shawshank Redemption escape plan. And if you think you can catch a break in the recreation yard, guess again. They let you exercise in a large cage for about 90 minutes while they tear your cell apart, searching for contraband. Real nice. You might ask, why the name Black Dolphin? Rumor has it that a sculpture of a black dolphin stands at the prison entrance, greeting you with a cheery, abandon all hope vibe. Honestly, Flipper has never looked so menacing. But it's the inmates you'll really need to worry about. Let's introduce Exhibit A of pure nightmare fuel, Vladimir Nikolaev, the cannibal killer of Novocheboksarsk. In 1997, he killed 2 men, one of them after a drunken argument that escalated into lethal violence. What followed veered into downright horror. As he dismembered his victim, he decided on a whim to boil and fry the flesh. Initially sentenced to death, his punishment was later changed to life in prison when Russia issued a moratorium on capital punishment in 1999. Technically, you can still be put to death, but why waste all that prisons like this have to offer? During an interview with National Geographic, Vladimir candidly recounted how he first tasted human flesh. He claimed he disliked it boiled, so he turned to frying it in a pan. Even more disturbing, he slipped this gruesome kangaroo meat to his own family, feeding dumplings laced with human remains to his unsuspecting wife and children. Believe it or not, it gets even worse. He reportedly sold around 5 kilograms of flesh at a local open market. His reign of terror finally ended when a suspicious customer took the odd-tasting meat to a doctor for testing, discovering it was undeniably human. Being locked up with a man like that is about as comforting as a roommate wanted ad from Hannibal Lecter. If you want to stay sane and uneaten here, then here are some survival tips. Stay physically active. In a place where you're forced to stand for most of the day, you don't have a choice. But try to maintain some core strength. That might help you endure the constant strain. Be observant and respect personal space. In a high-tension environment full of violent offenders like Vladimir Nikolaev, the slightest perceived disrespect can trigger conflict. Avoid confrontation unless it's absolutely necessary. I'd tell you to keep your head down, but with the blindfold transfers, that's mandatory anyway. And if you're hooked so far, be sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel for more gripping survival stories. Now, if you thought Black Dolphin was as close to hell on Earth as you could find, how about being locked away north of the Arctic Circle, where the average winter day feels like you're trapped in an industrial freezer? Yes, the official name is FKU-IK3, but inmates call it the Polar Wolf. This prison in Karp can hold over 1,000 convicts, and it specializes in taking harshness to another level. You'd expect a maximum security gulag in sub-zero conditions to at least have decent heating, right? Think again. Temperatures can plunge as low as minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, yet inmates are often forced to stand outside in thin clothing for 30 minutes or more, forbidden to so much as clasp their hands for warmth. If one prisoner dares to move, guards punish the entire group by blasting them with a water cannon, turning frigid air into an instrument of torture. The horrors don't let up in the warmer months either. Swarms of mosquitoes and biting flies descend, and prisoners risk another soaking if they try to swat away the insects. Cold water or mosquitoes? That's a tough call. Look, I get that punishment is the point, but just throw them a bone, you know? At least slap some painted radiators on those walls like some of the other Russian prisons on our list. Polar Wolf doesn't just rely on cold to break you. Solitary confinement cells, often described as opposition figure Alexei Navalny, arguably Russia's most well-known political prisoner, reportedly spent almost 300 days in one of these cells with zero access to the outside world. That's nearly 10 months of total isolation. The mental toll from that alone is enormous. According to the American Psychological Association, prolonged solitary confinement can lead to depression, hallucinations, and a slew of other psychological disorders. In 2021, Navalny, the famed political adversary of Vladimir Putin, returned to Russia after surviving a poisoning attack in Germany, only to be immediately arrested and locked away. He cited this was due to his failure to report to authorities while recovering from the poison in the hospital there. If this wasn't enough, an additional 9 years was added to his already ongoing 2.5-year prison sentence. His letters described his daily routine: forced labor, frequent cell checks, and zero tolerance for anything resembling defiance. In his 2024 memoir, he detailed the constant psychological pressure. Guards would whisper threats through the door, snatch away letters from supporters, and limit any meaningful human contact. He also staged a prolonged hunger strike to protest inadequate medical care and demanded that an independent doctor see him for severe back and leg pain. As for the authorities, they shrugged it off, letting him waste away. And then, in 2023, Navalny received an additional 19-year sentence on extremism charges, ensuring he never tasted freedom. Sadly, in February 2024, his sentence was cut short when Navalny died in prison. His diaries, later smuggled out and published in his book Patriot, exposed the prison's relentless psychological assaults. The diaries mention everything from guards screaming at random intervals throughout the night to freezing showers used as intimidation. The chilling part? Navalny revealed that guards would use sleep deprivation tactics on prisoners for weeks on end. That alone is enough to break even the toughest minds. Imagine trying to hold a hunger strike in sub-zero temperatures. That's like playing extreme hardcore mode in real life. Talk about willpower. Practice mindfulness to manage stress. Slow, deliberate breathing can keep panic attacks at bay. Also, a little respect towards guards, without crossing the line into betrayal with fellow inmates, may earn you the occasional courtesy. Like an extra blanket. But watch your back, because alliances shift quickly in these conditions. Trust me, in the polar wolf, an extra blanket could go a long way. The prison outfits here are not exactly built for the weather, and that's intentional. But you'll be praying for more than an extra blanket in our next frozen hellhole. Welcome to Polar Owl Prison, aka IK-18, or as I like to call it, the Siberian Soul Crusher. Tucked away in the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug, it sits in an unforgiving Arctic environment that punishes you for simply existing. Temperatures can plummet to minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit, and the region experiences months of polar night where the sun barely peeks over the horizon. The original intent was to keep convicts in a place so remote that even James Bond would have trouble waltzing out. Reality check: escape attempts are almost non-existent, thanks to the lethal climate. This remote fortress is reserved for some of Russia's most notorious criminals. Inmates are confined to cells that offer little defense against the biting cold. While some rely on small floor radiators that barely cut through the chill, others are left with nothing but mock radiators painted on the walls, visual illusions against a very real freeze. Perched 37 miles north of the Arctic Circle in the village of Karp, it's almost impossible to reach, let alone escape. Reports cite unbearable cold, meager food, unsanitary conditions, and constant beatings, forging a regime designed to break the human spirit. Multiple ex-inmates revealed the use of extreme torture methods here, even worse than water hosing, including brutal beatings and sexual abuse.
Руки связали за спиной, ноги между собой. Начали кричать, избивать меня по ребрам, по почкам, по голове, ногами.
They described it as torture designed to break your spirit as much as your body.
Один из них начал снимать с меня штаны. Я, соответственно, сразу сказал: остановитесь, мне еще сидеть, не ломайте мне жизнь. Я все подпишу, все, что вы от меня просите. Только не делайте этого и все.
Several studies have indicated prolonged exposure to such conditions can lead to severe post-traumatic stress disorder, often haunting prisoners long after release, if they survive at all. An incident exposed in 2018 from a Yaroslavl penal colony provided a haunting glimpse into a broader pattern that may well exist at isolated facilities like Polar Owl. 18 prison officials tortured Yevgeny Makarov, triggering investigations, suspensions, and arrests. Activists warn these abuses are hardly confined to one colony, especially where reports of torture often go unheard. Lawyers who dare challenge such cruelty, like Irina Biryakova, who had to flee Russia with her daughter after receiving death threats, risk severe reprisals. Though the Yaroslavl case sparked official outrage, many fear that at prisons like Polar Owl, hidden acts of brutality remain shrouded in Arctic isolation. Surviving the brutal reality of a prison like Polar Owl is all about building mental and physical resilience. Preserve body heat as much as possible. Layer up with anything available, including blankets, spare clothing, even newspaper. Preventing body heat loss is essential in this environment. Equally as important is the art of mental survival. Establish a routine, push-ups, simple chores, counting bricks, to fight hopelessness. As Maslow's hierarchy of needs suggests, a sense of control, however small, helps you maintain sanity. This is Russia's Alcatraz, but officially, it's Volgodsky Piatok. It's a high-security penitentiary where terrorists, crime bosses, and other dangerous inmates serve life sentences. Encircled by icy waters, it's been nicknamed Fire Island. A cruel twist given the frigid reality. Escaping here is about as likely as winning the lottery twice. Originally a military detention site, this prison was later converted into a holding pen for criminals too volatile for mainland facilities. During winter, the lake freezes over, forcing guards to use snowmobiles and specialized transport for supplies. Overcrowding remains a serious concern. Cells meant for 2 inmates sometimes have 3 or 4 crammed into them, fueling constant tension. Picture living on a wind-whipped rock with hundreds of violent offenders. Not exactly a tourist hotspot. Food rations are thin, so inmates barter cigarettes for table scraps. Sanitation? Think hole-in-the-floor toilets and no privacy. Human Rights Watch has repeatedly condemned conditions here, calling them torturous and unfit for any modern correctional purpose. Even the toughest can't ignore a perpetual sewage stench when you can't flush your cell toilet. But it's who you'll end up with that you should be really worried about. Like Fire Island's most feared inmate, Andrei Golovichev, known as the apartment maniac. Between 1996 and 2000, he murdered at least 14 victims across Russia, tricking people to gain entry into their homes. After a cafe waitress rejected him, he brutally stabbed her and slit her throat. Despite multiple arrests, he exploited legal loopholes until his final capture in 2000. Yikes. I would not want to bunk with this guy. Survival tips: know your surroundings. Even if you never intend to flee, memorize your cell block's layout. In a place where someone like the apartment maniac could be lurking, ignorance is lethal. Know which corridors lead where and who runs the show in each cell block. That mental map could save your skin. Another handy survival tip: learn the ropes of trading in prison. In a place with scarce resources, bartering items like soap or warm clothing can be your lifeline. But don't promise what you can't deliver. Sure, you might daydream about a slick, Hollywood-style prison break, but real life doesn't come with endless ammo and choreographed takedowns. The grim truth is, if Fire Island claims you, there's a good chance no one outside these walls will remember your name. So, if you're thinking of committing a crime in Russia, I hope this episode has changed your mind. These prisons are clearly unsafe human rights disasters, despite brave efforts to change them. Even famous athletes aren't immune to Russia's prison realities. WNBA star Brittany Griner spent almost 10 months detained in a penal colony for alleged drug charges. She's since been freed in a high-profile prisoner swap, but her brief stay peeled the curtain back on subpar medical care, minimal contact with family, and intense work requirements. And if that's what a celebrity endured, imagine the plight of average Russians or lesser-known foreigners stuck in these places. Hard pass. If you thought these prisons were bad, imagine bunking with a room full of El Salvador's most sadistic gangsters. At CECOT Supermax Prison, you'll be stuck with tens of thousands of them under one terrifying roof. Yeah, I don't think I'd last a minute in here.
Snitches don't get stitches, snitches get killed.
This is ADX Florence. Here, silence isn't a choice, it's a weapon.
I think what I'm most concerned about is just snapping one day. Just going off.
Time doesn't just pass, it breaks people. And survival isn't about fending off violent attacks. It's about surviving your own demons. Serial killers, terrorists, drug lords, and spies are all locked away inside this concrete labyrinth. Many of them serving life sentences with no hope of release, no possibility of parole, and no meaningful human contact. Why were group activities banned at ADX? What terrifying scene did the guards discover in this inmate's cell? And why exactly has this place faced so much backlash and protest? Stick around to find out as we dive into the dark secrets behind America's toughest prison. Let's rewind to the early 1990s. The United States federal prison system was under siege. Not from outside threats, but from within. Violent assaults on guards were skyrocketing. Inmates were organizing from behind bars. Gang leaders, terrorists, and mobsters were treating prison as just another headquarters. The Bureau of Prisons needed a solution. Not just better locks or more guards, but a facility that could isolate dangerous individuals entirely. No contact with staff, no influence over other inmates, and no chance to conspire. Its solution was ADX Florence, an administrative maximum security prison opened in 1995 and built into the harsh Colorado desert. While technically part of a larger correctional complex, ADX stands apart, physically and philosophically. Unlike other federal prisons, ADX wasn't designed to rehabilitate. It was built to neutralize. Some of the most infamous criminals in modern American history are or have been housed at ADX. You've got Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber, Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, Richard Reed, the so-called shoe bomber, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber, and how to survive regular, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the Mexican drug kingpin responsible for countless deaths and multiple prison escapes, until he ended up here. No one has ever escaped from ADX Florence, and that's by design. The perimeter is a maze of razor wire and guard towers. Inside, the prison is laced with surveillance cameras, motion detectors, thermal imaging sensors, and pressure-sensitive floors. The hallways are intentionally curved so that no one can see too far ahead or around a corner. Every movement, every word, and every flicker of activity is monitored.
We have hundreds of night vision cameras, hundreds of gates that are electronic. We can live time monitor over 50 languages.
The doors open only from a central control room. Out of over 300 guards, none of them carry keys. Inmates are moved one at a time through a strict choreographed system that eliminates any and all interaction. Now, picture this. You've just arrived. You're stripped of your clothes, your belongings, your name, everything but your thoughts. You walk through several layers of security. You pass guards who don't speak, and the weight of the walls close in around you. Finally, you're led to your new home. A 7 by 12 foot cell with a concrete bed, a desk, a metal toilet, and sink. Oh, and a tiny vertical slit in the wall that's angled just enough so you can't see the mountains surrounding the prison. Just a sliver of light to let you know another day has passed. There's no clock, no calendar, no way to mark time other than your own internal sense of decay. You eat, sleep, shower, and exercise alone. Meals are passed through a slot in the door. You receive questionable food in plastic containers, usually without utensils. If you follow the rules, you might earn a small TV with limited programming. Mostly religious broadcasts, educational content, or prison-approved news. You might get books, but nothing that shows you the outside world. Nothing that makes you feel connected to anything or anyone. Your 1 hour of Outdoor recreation happens in a concrete enclosure with a grate overhead. You breathe air, maybe feel the sun on your face, but you're still alone.
You just have to be alone with your thoughts and toss and turn till the morning. For 2 years, I never got a full night's sleep.
This intense level of isolation wasn't always the case. In the early years of ADX, inmates were sometimes allowed to interact during carefully monitored yard sessions. That all changed in 2005. Before we explain exactly why this happened and reveal more terrifying secrets about America's most secure prison, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a second of How to Survive. One fateful day, Manuel Tati Torres, a known member of the Mexican Mafia, was beaten to death by 2 fellow gang members during a group recreation session. The killing was calculated, sudden, and brutal.
No inmate prior to Tati was murdered at ADX. No inmate since Tati has been murdered at ADX.
After that, ADX permanently banned all group activities. Inmates now exist in complete solitude, physically, mentally, and emotionally.
One murder at ADX spoils it for everybody, and so now there is no human contact.
Every inch of the prison is designed to remove autonomy, eliminate influence, and erase identity. Every design decision, every policy revolves around one goal: total control. That includes the psychological environment. To the outside world, isolation might seem like a peaceful retreat, but extended solitary confinement has proven to have devastating consequences. Like severe psychological damage, including depression, hallucinations, self-harm, and suicide. Jack Powers is one of the most extreme examples. After being sent to ADX, his mental health deteriorated rapidly. He bit off his own finger. He cut off his earlobes and even removed his testicle. Jack was one of several inmates who have committed self-harm and attempted suicide at ADX. Eventually, he was released in 2022 after spending over 2 decades in solitary confinement.
I was a criminal. There's no question about it, no doubt about it. Yeah, I stole, I robbed. Did I deserve to be arrested and stopped from criminal activity? Yes. Did I deserve to be kept in a cage for almost 33 years of my life? I would have to say no.
Another inmate, Travis Dusenberry, spent 10 years in nearly total isolation. He said the only thing that kept him going was watching the snowfall through his window. That tiny moment of natural change was the only reminder that the world still existed. But peace like this is hard to come by. Loud screams, banging on doors, and feces being thrown at the guards were all commonplace in ADX's darkest days. So how do inmates at ADX survive? They create routines. Wake up, stretch, meditate, read, write, repeat. In a place where the days blend together, structure is the only defense against insanity. They follow rules, not just because punishment is severe, but because rewards, however minor, can mean the difference between despair and endurance. A book or even a blanket turns from a mundane item into a precious artifact. They avoid conflict because fighting leads to unimaginable forms of punishment. There is no upside to resistance, only more suffering. At ADX, punishment isn't just part of the system, it is the system. Inmates like Manuel Rodriguez and Mohamed Salame have both been strapped into restraint chairs for minor altercations involving the guards. The guards have an absurd amount of power over the prisoners. From restricting food and hygiene privileges to literal torture, they've abused the system, and the inmates have almost always paid the price. In just 1 year, there were 61 reported use of force incidents. That's code for everything from minor shoves to full-blown cell extractions with pepper spray and riot gear. 4 inmates were responsible for over a quarter of those reports. Rodriguez had 5 of them, including 2 that ended in the restraint chair. Another inmate, Floyd Martinez, got slammed with 3 use of force incidents in a single day. Like every system, corruption reigns supreme, and inmates claim that their behavior isn't what prompts these incidents. According to one prisoner, it's the guards provoking inmates, then body slamming them for reacting. Even when the aggression is just turning their head when they are spoken to. And then there's the brutal story of Mohammed Salameh. After going on a 34-day hunger strike, Salameh says he was force-fed over 200 times. A Department of Justice video backs him up. Footage shows him strapped to a black chair, an IV in one arm, and a nasogastric tube being forced through his nose. If you don't know what a nasogastric tube is, I'll tell you. Trigger warning, it's brutal. The inmate is restrained so tightly they can't move an inch. Then, a long tube is shoved through one of their nostrils, down the throat, and into their stomach. A bland, cream-colored liquid is slowly dripped down. The goal? Keep the body alive. The cost? Trauma, pain, sometimes irreversible damage. These incidents can leave deep scars, both physical and psychological. That's why most inmates eventually learn that it's better to keep your head down. Good behavior earns you mundane rewards and a life of silence. Bad behavior earns you pain, torture, and a life of violence. Hey, that rhymed. But seriously, what's being sold to the public as security and order looks more like psychological warfare behind bars. Think this system's working? Just wait till you hear about Jabbar Currents. Even if you manage to survive your time at ADX, you'll never be the same again. Because ADX isn't just a cage. It's a machine, built to dismantle the human spirit, piece by piece. And when inmates leave, they don't go home healed. They go home broken. Some reoffend immediately, not out of malice, but because they don't know how to exist in society. Jabbar Currents, after serving 11 years at ADX, was released. 3 days later, he assaulted a woman in a park. He now faces a potential life sentence, which has yet to be confirmed.
Got borderline personality disorder, schizoaffective disorder, a cyclical mood disorder, bipolar, antisocial personality disorder.
Others, even if they avoid reoffending, find themselves overwhelmed by simple interactions. Crowds, conversations, and noise are all potential triggers. After years in a sensory vacuum, the outside world becomes alien.
And then you're dropped off in 42nd Street, Times Square, the biggest tourist spot in the world, with 20 million computers. It's a sensory overload.
Former prison staff and attorneys have voiced concerns for years, but treatment is still minimal. Shockingly, as many as a third of the inmates at ADX have a diagnosed mental illness, making them a serious threat to themselves and others.
What we found was a prison that was full of people who were, many of whom were catastrophically mentally ill and who were receiving little, if any, treatment of any kind.
So, is this justice, or is this institutionalized psychological torture? Many, including former inmates like Dennis Hope, have argued that solitary confinement violates the 8th Amendment of the US Constitution, which protects against cruel and unusual punishment.
In European countries, it's considered a violation of human rights for someone to be locked up for more than 15 days in solitary confinement. That's 15 days, and we're locking up people here for 20 or 30 years.
In June 2012, a group of 11 prisoners at ADX sued the Federal Bureau of Prisons for their lack of proper care for mentally ill inmates. Shortly after, in a Senate hearing in 2012 on solitary confinement, Charles Samuels, the director of the Bureau of Prisons, testified that there weren't any insane prisoners housed at ADX. But this simply was not the case. As ADX prisoner Jesse Wilson wrote in 2012 for the online publication Solitary Watch, this is what should be thought of as a lie. I have not slept in weeks due to these non-existing inmates beating on the walls and hollering all night, and the most non-insane smearing feces in their cells. The lead plaintiff in the lawsuit, Harold Cunningham, who had spent over a decade in solitary at ADX, also spoke of the abuse he faced. In a statement, he explained, "I was treated and lived like an animal for years, stripped of all my clothes for weeks at a time. Just a blanket chained to my bed, water turned off, no shower at times. No food, and when they did feed me, it was bad food. Stale bread and cheese, rotten apple. I was beaten while handcuffed. All this on and off throughout 5 to 6 years." Wow. Pretty brutal. A settlement was reached in 2016, and ADX instated better mental health screenings by licensed professionals, and over 100 mentally ill prisoners were transferred to other facilities. Since then, the Bureau of Prisons has also introduced STAGES, a treatment program for inmates with borderline personality disorder. It stands for Steps Towards Awareness, Growth, and Emotional Strength. The goal is to help participants manage their mental illness, learn new skills, and ultimately rehabilitate. Nowadays, ADX's new mandate is to keep prisoners no more than 3 years in solitary confinement, and then be transferred to a less restrictive prison for the remainder of their sentence. After a year in solitary, inmates are gradually allowed more time out of their cells if they behave. So what do you think? Is ADX Florence inhumane, or a necessary solution to keep the public safe? Let us know in the comments below. No matter what your stance is on ADX Florence, it's clear that it was built to contain the uncontainable, to house the most dangerous men in the country, and keep them silent, still, and out of reach. And by that measure, it has succeeded. El Chapo, the shoe bomber, the Boston Marathon bomber, none of them have escaped ADX. And none of them ever will. But what happens to a society that uses silence, darkness, and isolation as tools of punishment? What happens when we stop trying to reform and instead start trying to erase? Because ADX doesn't just remove people from the world, it removes the world from people. And when that process is complete, what returns, if anything, isn't a human being. At ADX Florence, you don't survive the inmates, you survive yourself. And that's what makes it one of the most sinister, most effective, and most terrifying institutions in America.
It's been years since you last saw the sky. You haven't seen another person or heard a human voice in weeks. All you know now are these walls, just inches away from your face. Slowly, your mind is slipping into madness, but nobody cares and nobody will come to help you. Ever. You'll be locked up in this tiny cell for the rest of your life. It might sound like a horror movie, but that's how the most dangerous inmates in the United States live at the Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, commonly known as ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the country, and possibly the world. These walls are reserved for those whom the American government deems an exceptional threat to society, like the Unabomber, 9/11 terrorists, or the most notorious drug lord in history, El Chapo, a brutal killer who allegedly ordered the deaths of between 2,000 and 3,000 people. Not to mention the hundreds of thousands who died from drug overdoses worldwide. But the real reason El Chapo ended up here is because he's become somewhat of an escape artist. He's managed to bust loose not just once, but twice from top-notch security prisons.
That all-out manhunt right now for the world's most dangerous drug lord, Joaquin Guzman, known as El Chapo.
Mexican authorities were confident no one could possibly escape the country's only supermax prison until last night.
This is a man who the Mexican government had said would never break out of prison again, but he did.
After his third arrest, American authorities wasted no time and pushed for his extradition to the United States, fearing he would escape yet again. After being sentenced to life in prison, he was sent to ADX. Even this callous criminal cried after learning he would spend his days in these torturous conditions. Would you fare better than him? Well, your chances don't look great. This prison has managed to break even the most vicious felons, making them succumb to the greatest threat within these walls, their own minds. At least 6 inmates have died by suicide since the prison opened in 1994, and many others have descended into insanity, resorting to eating their own waste or mutilating their bodies in horrifying ways. If you're locked up in here, your primary concern shouldn't be whether you'll see the sky again, but if you'll be able to retain your sanity. Has anyone gone on to live a normal life after spending time here? How did a decade in solitary confinement mutilate one inmate beyond recognition? And why do ADX officials believe that El Chapo is planning another escape? Well, before we can answer all that, we need to take a trip back in time. And you need to subscribe to our channel for more survival content. Once upon a time, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was one of the richest and most powerful men in the world. For years, he ran one of the largest criminal enterprises on the planet, the Sinaloa Cartel, a shady criminal enterprise that makes, moves, and sells drugs everywhere. American authorities figure that this organization pulls in about $40 billion every year. Even after getting nabbed and tossed in a Mexican slammer in 1993, El Chapo continued to rule the cartel from behind bars until 2001. That's when rumors about his imminent extradition to the United States reached the drug lord's ears, and he escaped from prison, with a little help from some crooked officials. According to witnesses, guards popped open his cell, put him in a laundry cart, and rolled him out to the parking lot, where his cartel buddies were waiting to whisk him away. He kept running the show out in the open for nearly 15 years, until he got caught again in 2014. This time, they stuck him in a super secure slammer, where they watched his every move. But even with all the tight security, one night, just 18 months after getting caught, El Chapo disappeared again. He escaped through an elaborate tunnel, 10 meters deep into the ground, extending over 1.5 kilometers to an abandoned house near the prison. Thankfully, he was nabbed again the following year and shipped off to the toughest prison in the country. Now, some authorities are sweating bullets, thinking he's cooking up another escape plan. But how is he planning to escape again? Well, we'll expand on that in a sec. ADX was made for guys like him, who spot a chance to bust out with every little crack in the system. But here, there ain't no cracks. Most inmates here stay locked up solo for 23 hours a day. They never catch a glimpse of the sky, the mountains, not even a stretch of highway. Just cold, hard concrete. Even an hour in the recreation cage, which is just another dim cell, is seen as a rare treat around here. And yeah, Supermax has an even tougher spot. It's called Range 13, where inmates are watched 24/7, spend years in solitary, and never see the outside world. They only get a 15-minute call once a month. Well, maybe not all of them. Back in 2023, El Chapo griped to a Chicago judge about being kept away from his lawyer and legal papers, saying he was getting pushed around by the authorities because of his past breakouts. But for the folks in charge, that's just a sign he's plotting his next getaway. Even one of the old wardens, Robert Hood, figures El Chapo won't stop trying to bust out, just to test how far he can push the system. But maybe madness will take over the gangster's mind before he can try to break free. Like it has with so many other inmates. One of the most notorious of them is Jack Powers, who spent 12 years in solitary confinement at ADX. Before getting locked up at ADX, Powers never showed signs of mental illness, but after a few years, he started harming himself brutally, biting off one of his fingers, slicing his Achilles tendon, and mutilating his genitals. After enduring this horrifying ordeal, he was finally transferred to a mental institution. Now, he's out of prison and speaks against solitary confinement, advocating for prison reform in the United States. During his time in solitary confinement, he read and wrote a lot. His writing was his way to let out his feelings and helped him get through the horrors of prison life and the challenges of his own mind. Now, despite the toll this supermax prison can take on your sanity, ADX isn't even the deadliest prison in the world.
What the hell are they doing with weapons inside the prison? It's just intimidation. straight away.
Los guardias nunca te entraron. Nosotros entramos, pero nomás son leyes allá. No quieren respetar el espacio, bueno.
It's the prisoners who control the prison, who organize themselves. We're only instruments to survey the walls and control the barriers. Nothing more.
South American prisons are notoriously known for their violence, overcrowding, and corruption. From deadly riots claiming the lives of hundreds, to prison systems where the inmates are the ones in charge. Being a prisoner in one of these hellholes takes a lot of grit and survival skills. Today we'll be exploring some of South America's toughest prisons and how to survive them, if that's even possible. What Venezuelan prison housed families, including the children, of inmates? How did inmates assassinate a Colombian prison director? And does a prison in Bolivia really offer tourist accommodations? La Sabaneta Prison.
Here, it is the prisoners who are in charge.
Sabaneta Prison is located in the scorching border city of Maracaibo, Venezuela. Built in 1958, it closed in 2013. But 10 years later, some sources claimed it had reopened its doors, causing concern for residents living nearby. Split into 4 areas, the prison was home to disgraced military and police officers, petty criminals, convicts with more serious charges, and the country's most violent offenders. At any given time, all 900 plus inmates were overseen by only 40 officers. The majority were from the National Guard, while as few as 8 officers were part of the prison system. With strength in numbers, an overpopulation issue, and all types of criminals living under one roof, it's no surprise that a hierarchy was quickly established among the prisoners themselves. Like most prisons in Venezuela, gangs of inmates unofficially run the operations inside the prison, with the guards simply ensuring no one escapes. Due to a lack of food, medical supplies, and some inmates sleeping 2 to 3 to a bed, tensions at Sabaneta were always high. In 1994, a prison riot broke out, a regular occurrence in Venezuelan prisons. But this time, things got really bad. Seeking revenge on a rival gang, a group of inmates took it upon themselves to prove a point.
These smoldering remains are the result of an interracial revenge attack. Indian inmates have broken out of their cells and firebombed a section of the jail where white prisoners are confined.
In an attempt to avoid being burned alive, some inmates rushed out, only to be shot or stabbed to death. In total, over 100 prisoners were killed, with some sources claiming up to 150 died. And it wasn't just the inmates causing chaos. In response to the deadly riots, the National Guard stormed the prison with heavy weapons and tear gas. It's unclear who was responsible for each death, but one survivor said he saw an inmate try to escape the fire, only to be beheaded with an axe. He explained how they started playing soccer with his head, shouting, "We have to kill them, we have to kill them." What the f***?
Okay, that was dark.
In 1994, about 3,400 inmates were packed into a prison meant for only 900. Sadly, even after the riots, almost nothing was done to fix the overcrowding. In 2013, another riot involving gangs claimed 16 lives. At the time, the total number of inmates increased to 3,700. Things were also different this time around. There was a clear hierarchy among the prison gangs, with a gang leader, or prawn, in charge of the operations. In 2013, the man running the show was known as El Mocho Edwin. As the leader, he oversaw all business dealings happening inside and outside the prison. Sabaneta also became a home for families, not just prisoners. A total of 192 children were living inside the quarters alongside their imprisoned parents. A raid following the 2013 riots also revealed that animals from dogs to turkeys and pigs, not to mention an ocelot, were present inside. Following the prison's closure in 2013, El Mocho wasn't so eager to leave, but after some negotiations with authorities, he agreed to be transferred to another facility. In 2023, some residents feared the jail had reopened, with reports that inmates were being transferred at dawn to avoid confrontations with locals. Surviving a prison like Sabaneta is simple. Follow the rules set out by the gangs, pay for protection and do your best to stay out of trouble. Otherwise, your head may be used as a soccer ball.
Soccer?
Overcrowding is a common theme here, but our next prison is also divided by politics. And depending on where your allegiance lies, it can determine how you survive. La Modelo. La Modelo opened in 1960 in Bogota, Colombia. It was originally designed to hold 720 inmates. With a focus on increasing the capacity and holding political prisoners, it quickly became overcrowded. Now, it is one of the deadliest prisons in the country. It has a capacity of more than 3,000, but sources suggest its true population is significantly higher. Divided into north and south wings, this prison is home to everyone from petty thieves, rapists, drug traffickers, and murderers.
The hardest thing is to maintain an equilibrium between the different factions. There is the right, the left, the drug traffickers, the terrorists, the assassins, the white-collar thieves. That's the hardest thing.
The North Wing is home to the Marxist guerrilla inmates. Most, if not all, inmates residing here are considered extreme left-wing supporters of the government. They take care of each other because they can't rely on anyone else. The prison offers one meal a day, but only the poorest eat what's offered.
We buy the food. Everything that is eaten here comes from us. The state gives us no way of surviving. It doesn't assure our security.
Inmates in the North Wing are seen as terrorists for opposing the current government, so they get no special treatment. The South Wing, where the extreme right militia resides, is actually more comfortable. Although both sides have poor inmates, the South Wing has a social security program. Overall, right-wing supporters get better living conditions. There's also strength in numbers, with the guards significantly outnumbered.
It's unfair. There are only 2 for 1,600 prisoners. They don't control anything.
Regardless of which side you're on, unlike most prisons, La Modelo is more of a city that runs itself. Prisoners are rarely behind bars during the day. The cells are reserved for new inmates or a temporary home for those seeking protection. The guards who patrol the grounds don't have weapons, but those who oversee the facility from watchtowers above are equipped with rifles. That being said, inmates having access to guns and even hand grenades is a common issue, and the guards aren't stopping much. Before we go any further into the madness of life behind the walls of La Modelo, make sure to like and subscribe for more incredible survival stories. With political tensions overshadowing this prison, violent outbursts are common, especially when the inmates roam freely and the only thing separating the two quarters is a neutral zone. In April 2000, a 12-hour gang riot broke out. In total, 32 were killed and 17 more injured. Most died by gunshot, while others suffered stab wounds. A 2016 investigation determined that the remains of at least 100 prisoners and visitors were found throughout the jail's sewage system. Visitors too? According to testimony from a former inmate, he would actually pay guards to look the other way when they were dismembering bodies to hide the evidence.
The staff is terrible with the people, terrible. To get in there, they search us. They do everything to us, and they know that they themselves are the corrupt ones.
In January 2020, the prison was holding just under 5,000 inmates. During the COVID-19 pandemic, a riot was started by inmates fearing for their safety due to a lack of protocols in place to separate the infected from the healthy. In March 2020, 24 people were killed and 107 were injured during what Colombia's Justice Minister, Margarita Cabello, claimed was a massive criminal escape attempt. Both inmates and guards were among those injured. Autopsies found that the gunshot wounds suffered by inmates looked like the guards were shooting to kill. 3 officers were charged for their role in the riots, but 2 years later, the charges were dropped because the time limit to prosecute them had run out. Most recently, in 2024, the prisoner's director at the time, Elmer Fernandez, was assassinated after he ignored warnings from inmates to stop pursuing unannounced searches within the jail quarters. Surviving La Modelo truly depends on which side of the political spectrum you align with. Knowing who your allies are and staying out of any political or gang-related activities will help. But as is the case with any of these prisons, there's no real guarantee. our last prison is a society of its own. At one point, tourists would stay at the hotel within the prison's walls. Yeah, it's not the Four Seasons, but you get what you pay for. San Pedro Prison.
There are 20 of us and 2,000 of them. 20 police officers for more than 2,000 prisoners. We're powerless. We can't do anything.
San Pedro Prison was built in 1890 in the heart of La Paz, Bolivia. In 2002, the government decided to let the prisoners run everything inside its walls. Today, it's become a society similar to that of a small city. Although some consider it a social experiment, it's clear that this was simply an excuse to abandon inmates in the overcrowded prison and save money. Now, it's overseen by one boss and his elected leaders.
The new one here is only a prisoner when I decide he's a prisoner. I explain the rules of conduct in this penitentiary. This helps avoid problems later on.
Inmates are allowed to roam freely, but are assigned living quarters based on their age, crime, and how much they can afford. That's right, inmates here need to pay rent for a place to stay.
Rent?
Those with enough money can actually purchase their cell as an investment and sell it once they're released.
The inmates have invented a rating system, so you have anything from 0 stars up to 5.5 stars, where the really rich drug traffickers and politicians live.
The more luxurious cells are equipped with ensuite bathrooms, views over the city, and carpeting. I mean, it's really making me rethink how I've designed this bunker. Unfortunately for prisoners who can't afford a cell, conditions can be brutal. Nightfall brings frequent crime, and for some, it's not the violence that proves fatal, but the freezing temperatures. Making money is essential for survival in a prison like San Pedro. Most inmates work jobs to stay alive, which guarantees them food and a warm place to stay.
There are messengers earning 1 or 2 Bolivianos in order to call visitors to the gate. There are people shining shoes, there are cooks, there are people doing woodworks.
Whether or not a person is awaiting trial or has already been sentenced for life, with little social services in the country, they still need to provide for their families behind bars. This often leads to entire families living in the prison. Although women and children can roam freely, it's still not ideal. In 2018, it was believed that over 2,000 children lived within the walls of San Pedro.
When my husband got arrested, we had to give up our old apartment. My husband decided that from now on, we would live here together. We're like his key point, his strength, so he can survive here.
Most inmates are drug traffickers, but the prison also holds murderers, thieves, and sex offenders. And the other inmates don't take kindly to those accused of touching children.
In one of the sections, there's a sort of a well, and they fill it with water, and they just throw them in there, and they beat them, drown them, electrocute them, stab them, and then just kick them until they're dead.
Those who survive the beatings end up working in the kitchen or cleaning bathrooms and sweeping the prison floors, all without pay. Drugs are also a huge problem within the prison, with approximately 60% of inmates using regularly. Given that cocaine labs are operating inside San Pedro and distributing drugs throughout the country, they're not hard to come by. The heavy use of drugs is often what leads to violent outbursts between inmates. And when things go bad, it's not the guards who handle things, but elected leaders known as delegados.
The delegados let us know if something has happened in the prison. They also determine the penalties for crimes. We act as an executive power only.
At one point, San Pedro was open to tourists. For a mere $5, they were given a guided tour. But that's not all.
For $5 as a tourist, you could spend the night inside this prison and you could get whatever you wanted, drugs, alcohol. You could get the police to order you a pizza. It's just crazy.
The government denied claims that this was happening, but eventually, a video uploaded to YouTube revealed the truth. The Bolivian government cracked down and put an end to the tours in 2009. Now, with corruption and bribes among guards a regular occurrence, tours are still happening, just not as frequently. As of 2025, it's hard to get a true number of how many inmates and families are living inside the walls of San Pedro.
I had a German friend, Stefan. 2 years ago, he suddenly disappeared. The others said he committed suicide. But who knows if that's true?
Police simply patrol the outside of the prison, ensuring that what happens behind the walls of San Pedro stays behind the walls of San Pedro. As long as nothing spills onto the streets, they aren't getting involved. If it isn't clear by now, staying out of trouble when visiting any country in South America is your safest way to avoid dealing with any of these inmates. Knowing local laws and being respectful of cultures will hopefully be enough to keep you out of prison. Warning, this episode is not for the faint of heart. Viewer discretion is advised.
I was going to eat his heart. That's what I did. It was revenge, but I didn't swallow.
It's a fact that a spoon was found in the victim's brain.
He not only liked eating the flesh of these children, but drinking their blood.
And he said I did the most horrendous crime in the whole wide world.
Not true?
I guess not. All they were was shot and left.
From extreme violence to cannibalism to unspeakable acts that will make you sick to your stomach, today we're looking at some of the world's deadliest inmates. While some have higher kill counts than others, every single one of them will make you question how a human is possibly capable of what these inmates have done. Which inmate was known for attacking prison guards naked? Why did an inmate attempt to revive people after killing them? And how did one victim survive an inmate's massacre that killed 8 others?
To be honest, I don't have any remorse about who I killed. They were people who weren't worth a damn.
Pedro Rodriguez Filho, nicknamed Pedrino Matador, was either a serial killer or a vigilante, depending on who you ask. Born on a farm in Brazil, he took his first life at just 14 years old, killing a local politician who fired his father from a security job after accusing him of stealing food from a school cafeteria. He then killed the man he believed was the real culprit. After his pregnant fiancée at the time was killed by a gang, Pedro and a few friends went on a massacre, killing 7 members and injuring another 16 at a wedding reception. He was first arrested in 1973 at 18 years old and was sentenced to 126 years in prison. Mainly targeting drug traffickers, rapists, murderers, and other criminals, Pedro did most of his killing well behind bars. Yeah, this man was on a mission. While incarcerated, Pedro murdered more than 40 inmates, but he saved the worst for his father, who was imprisoned for killing his mother. What he did to his dad was revenge on a whole other level.
I cut out a piece of his heart. I chewed because I had said I was going to eat his heart. That's what I did. It was revenge. But I didn't swallow. I chewed and threw it over the body.
Despite his heinous crimes, Pedro was released from prison in 2007 due to a loophole at the time in Brazil's laws that didn't allow inmates to be locked up for more than 30 years. In 2011, he was charged and arrested for threatening people, illegal weapons possession, and illegal rioting. In 2018, he was re-released and seemed to turn a corner. He launched a YouTube channel warning people against crime. Pedro was also the inspiration for the book-turned-TV series Dexter. But in March 2023, his dream of stardom faded when he was shot and killed by 2 unknown men. No arrests have been made. Even though he chewed his father's heart, Pedro wasn't considered a cannibal. Our next inmate, however, was nicknamed Hannibal the Cannibal.
They brought him into a cell, shut the door, and they then proceeded to torture him for 9 hours.
Robert Maudsley was born in Liverpool, England, and from a very young age endured abuse from his father. While working as a sex worker in London in 1974, Maudsley strangled a client to death who showed him photos of a child he had abused. He later turned himself in. Deemed unfit for trial, Maudsley was sent to Broadmoor Hospital in 1977, where he killed again. This murder is what led to his infamous nickname, Hannibal the Cannibal.
Maudsley tore this man apart. He smashed open his head, and it's a fact that a spoon was found in the victim's brain. So Maudsley said he did not use that spoon to eat his brain, but the spoon was lodged there.
Why lodge a spoon in his brain? It doesn't matter. Maudsley was moved to Wakefield Prison in 1978, where he killed another 2 inmates. Thankfully, no spoon was found in their brains. He was then transferred to solitary confinement to endure his life sentence in complete solitude. All of his victims were sex offenders. In his last murder trial in 1979, Maudsley admitted that he believed in his mind that his victims were his parents. It was his way of dealing with the trauma from a childhood of constant abuse. A 2-cell unit was built specifically for Maudsley in 1983. It eerily resembles the unit in the 1991 film The Silence of the Lambs. To date, he's spent 46 years in solitary confinement, earning him the record for longest-serving prisoner in those conditions in the history of the UK. Some sources dub him Britain's most violent prisoner, but that title may go to our next inmate. Charles Bronson, born Michael Gordon Peterson, is one of Britain's most violent and notorious inmates. Born in Bedfordshire, England, Bronson started with petty crimes at 13 years old, but didn't face any jail time until 1974, when the then 22-year-old was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 7 years. Throughout his first stint in prison, Bronson was transferred to numerous prisons and psychiatric hospitals, gaining a reputation for his extreme violence. From attacking inmates and guards to breaking out of his cell and rioting on prison rooftops, Bronson had his sentence extended until 1987, when he was finally released. Upon his release, Bronson, who was back using his Michael Peterson birth name at the time, started to fight in illegal bare-knuckle boxing matches. His fight promoter encouraged him to change his name, which he did. Now, before we knock out the rest of Charles Bronson's violent history, make sure to like and subscribe for more incredible survival stories. Just over a year after his release, Bronson was yet again locked up for armed robbery. In 1989, he made a makeshift spear with a broom and a broken bottle and ran around his cell naked. Okay, wow, I would not want to be this guy's cellmate. Luckily for the other inmates, the actions of the heavily armed guards led to Bronson's surrender and no one got hurt. Bronson was released again in '92 and, after a few months, was back to his old ways. He was found guilty of intent to rob, as well as possession of a shotgun, and was sentenced to 8 years. He's been in the slammer ever since. In 2014, he infamously greased himself up with butter and ran around naked after his least favorite soccer team won a championship game. When the guards tried to apprehend him, he fought back, calling it the rumble of his life. To no surprise, he lost and broke some ribs during the scuffle. While in prison, Bronson has held nearly a dozen people hostage, including inmates and visitors. This led to him receiving a life sentence. Although he's technically never killed anyone, his violent outbursts and attempts at murder make him a risk to the public. It goes without saying that you'd want to avoid anyone on this list, but our next inmate seemed to kill out of pleasure.
Panzram was arrested for a housebreaking charge, relatively minor. And when the police brought him in, he said, "This is a very small charge. I've committed numerous murders over the years. This is nothing."
Carl Panzram was born in 1891, just outside of Minnesota. Raised on a farm in an abusive household, he began with petty crimes at just 8 years old. At 11, he burned down a reform school where the staff abused him. When he was 16, Panzram decided to join the military, but was caught stealing and sentenced to 3 years in Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. After being released, he traveled across the US, parts of South America, and Europe, engaging in criminal activity including assault and robbery, while using multiple aliases. Panzram didn't start killing until 1920, after he robbed the home of William Howard Taft, a former US president. His haul included jewelry, bonds, and a pistol. With the money, Panzram bought a yacht and lured local sailors on board one at a time. He'd get them drunk, have his way with them, then kill them. Sadly, this was just the start. He continued his sadistic behavior in Africa. Panzram hired 6 men for a fake job, only to kill and feed them to crocodiles. Once he returned to the US, he continued his spree until his final arrest in 1928, when he was given life in prison. While there, he murdered a guard with an iron bar and was sentenced to death. Our next inmate will give you nightmares about going to the hospital.
Well, former nurse Niels Hergel is already serving life imprisonment after being convicted of the murder and attempted murder of 6 patients who were in his care when he worked in a hospital near the city of Bremen between the years of 2000 and 2005.
Born in Germany in 1976, Niels Hergel is known as the serial killer nurse and is serving life in prison for his crimes. He started in the cardiac surgery unit of a German hospital's ICU in 1999. In 2001, doctors held a meeting after there was a noticeable rise in resuscitations and deaths, with Hergel on duty during more than half of the incidents. In 2002, Hergel transferred to another clinic, where medical emergencies or deaths involving high blood pressure or heart failure spiked. To no surprise, Hogle was again on duty when the majority of these incidents happened. On June 22, 2005, Hogle was caught in the act of injecting a patient with a drug known to cause cardiac arrest. He was arrested that summer, but the gruesome details wouldn't be revealed until years later. In 2008, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for attempted murder. But the families of other suspected victims pushed for further investigations, which exposed the sad truth. In 2015, Hogle admitted to murdering at least 6 patients, and then went on to claim he killed another 30 by lethal injection. He was sentenced to life in prison. His reasoning? Boredom, and to show off his ability to resuscitate people. Yeah, this guy is sick. Just 4 years later, authorities discovered he was actually responsible for killing 85 patients. However, investigators believe that number could really be as high as 200. Taking us back to the United States, this inmate is one of America's most famous female serial killers.
You killed 7 men, 7 strangers. Does that not make you a serial killer?
So I didn't kill them every day, did I?
Eileen Wuornos was born in Michigan in 1956 and came from an abusive household. It seems to be a common theme among a lot of the inmates on our list. Working as a prostitute to support herself and her drug addiction, Wuornos was arrested a handful of times in the 70s for robbery and auto theft.
She was being arrested for driving under the influence, for assault and battery, for robbery.
However, her most significant crimes happened between 1989 and 1990. In 1 year, she was responsible for robbing and killing 7 men and dumping their bodies on the side of the road. Pretending to be a hitchhiking sex worker throughout Florida, the men would pick her up and then fall victim. Once she was arrested, Wuornos claimed she acted in self-defense, but the victims' gunshot wounds proved otherwise. Some were shot multiple times. In 1992, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Shortly after, she admitted to 3 more murders and claimed she did so for profit, not in self-defense. On October 9th, 2002, Eileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. She was only the 2nd woman in Florida to be executed since the state restored the death penalty in 1976. Fun fact, Charlize Theron played Wuornos in her 2003 Oscar-winning performance in the film Monster. Our next inmate might encourage you to invest in better home security.
All week long, we have been showing you some disturbing images of the mass murderer. We heard Speck confess and show absolutely no remorse for his heinous crimes.
Richard Speck was born in Kirkwood, Illinois in 1941. Suffering abuse at the hands of his alcoholic stepfather, he turned to alcohol himself in his early teens. His first arrest came at just 13 years old, and over the next 8 years, he was in and out of jail for petty crimes. But the worst of his crimes occurred in 1966, starting with robbing and sexually assaulting a 65-year-old woman. It's believed he killed another woman shortly after. Police questioned him regarding the murder, but he wasn't arrested. Afterward, he fled to Chicago. On July 13th, 1966, Richard Speck broke into a townhouse, which was home to 9 female nursing students. And the details of his massacre are absolutely brutal. While holding the students in a room for hours, he led them out one by one and killed them. His method of murder was either stabbing them, strangling them, or both. He also forced himself onto one of the victims before killing her. In total, Speck killed 8 of the 9 students, with the only one surviving by hiding under a bed and waiting for Speck to leave before calling for help. On April 15th, 1967, Richard Speck was sentenced to death, but that was changed to a 100-year sentence in 1972. Initially claiming he was drunk and high during the massacre, he later admitted he would have done the same thing sober. While imprisoned, Speck died of a heart attack on December 5th, 1991. Of all the inmates on our list, this next one definitely has the scariest nickname, and for good reason.
He not only liked eating the flesh of these children, but drinking their blood, and that also gave him a feeling of great satisfaction.
Albert Fish was born in Washington, D.C. in 1870. He was also known as the Gray Man or the Boogeyman, and his horrific crimes are to blame. Obsessed with inflicting pain, both on himself and others, Fish was known to hit himself with a paddle covered in nails. He was found to have dozens of sewing needles inside of his body, mainly around his groin area. When he wasn't torturing himself, his victims, mainly children, would have to endure excruciating agony. Although an exact number was never confirmed, police believed he killed up to 15 children. In 1928, Fish who was 58 years old at the time, tortured 10-year-old Grace Budd and sent a letter to her family describing his gruesome crimes. Guys, I'm not going to explain them here because they are absolutely horrendous. In 1934, Albert Fish was arrested and admitted to killing Grace and other children. He tried to plead insanity, claiming voices in his head told him to kill his young victims. Although numerous psychiatrists did claim he was insane, the jury didn't care, and Fish was sentenced to death by electric chair. On January 16, 1936, Albert Fish was executed at New York State's Sing Sing prison. Knowing what's going on around you, traveling in groups, and trusting your instincts are all good ways to avoid being a victim of a serious crime. Of course, every situation is unique, but I'd say these tips are a good place to start. Well, that does it for me. Pretty messed up if you ask me. But if you want to learn more about terrifying inmates, check out our video on South America's toughest prisons. We'll see you next time on How to Survive.